CEO Daddy. Chapter 1283. Men wanted to be responsible. After Alvina Miller packed her stuff, she went to the archives to report on her progress. Could it be that it had something to do with Joseph Grant sleeping on her bed last night? Was that man responsible for her? That was why he gave her a promotion so early in the morning? Alvina Miller's mind was full of random thoughts, and in the end, even she started to laugh idiotically. Although she did not value promotion or salary, she did not lack money in her life anyways. What she lacked was love. Although Joseph Grant did not greet her in advance, Alvina Miller knew that it had something to do with him. Sure enough, the archive was much more peaceful and casual. Moreover, there weren't many staff members. It was unlike the place where she used to work, where she was always nervous and prepared. Her nerves were always on edge. She was in charge of a small area, and had left behind all sorts of records and organized documents. Currently, the most important thing for Alvina Miller was to know how to compile books, as well as how to organize and sort the archives. At the side was a little guy, although he looked normal, but he was warm-hearted. Such a boring and tasteless office, yet such a beautiful little girl suddenly appeared, causing the entire office to look as if it was filled with sunlight. Alvina Miller became a national treasure, surrounded by a few middle-aged aunties and a few young men. Alvina Miller no longer felt the sense of danger of being seen as a public enemy. As a result, Alvina Miller enjoyed the most leisure time of the day in her office. Reading, writing, numbering. 4 sides were all quiet. Occasionally people would come over to take the documents, but there were not too many people. Alvina Miller was not familiar with her work. Since someone had come to ask for her documents, she was sweating profusely in anxiety, and after looking for half a day, she still could not find it. Fortunately, with the help of the 2 guys beside her, she was able to solve her problem. Alvina Miller was born into a merchant family, so she had a tactful way of handling matters, especially in allowing people to communicate and maintain their relationships with each other. Thus, in the afternoon, Alvina Miller gave everyone a cup of coffee, immediately gaining a lot of people's hearts. Alvina Miller learned from her grandfather when she was young. She saw that her grandfather would always treat his friends to dinner every few days, treat his subordinates to dinner, and even personally bring her to visit his client's home during the New Year holidays. At the time, she felt that it was strange. If it was to please a client, then why did he please his subordinate as well? Her grandpa explained it for her. The people in this world all had their own interests and relationships. Respecting people was one thing, but whether or not you can give other people preferential treatment, while respecting each other, you can also get closer to the relationship between them. Giving them roses as a gift and learning how to be smart to please others was always better than offending others. Therefore, Alvina Miller had understood from a young age that if you want others to treat you well, you have to first learn how to treat others well. Their relationship was mutual, so being friends was better than being enemies. Alvina Miller's relationship with others was not bad. In school, she was recognized as a good student, with a lot of social connections and was welcomed by many, and also, she made a group of like-minded friends, just that after everyone graduated, they all had their own futures and their time together would be short. Maybe this was what everyone felt after they grew up, but after they walked out of the society, they all had their own things to do and it would be difficult for them to get together again. After the day's work ended, Alvina Miller's shift had ended more than an hour earlier than before. Furthermore, she now belonged to the administrative class, unlike the reception room, where she was ready to receive orders at any time, no matter how late it was. As long as she didn't finish her work, she could still arrange for overtime work. Alvina Miller laughed as she drove her small sports car home. Recently, she had become more and more like to take care of family, but now that she thought about it, she was only 23 years old. She should be the age to release herself. What's wrong with me? That's obviously not my home, but I think about going back every day. Alvina Miller stopped in front of the red and green lights, sighed, and activated the music. A low and deep male voice sounded out. It was actually a love song, the lyrics that struck at one's heart, and it was extremely romantic, causing one's imagination to run wild. Listening to such a love song over and over again, Alvina Miller's car stopped at the main gate. She didn't know whether Joseph Grant would come back today, so she didn't dare to ask him on the phone. She kept having the feeling that she was purposely avoiding this relationship, so she should be more sensible and not create trouble for him. Alvina Miller, is this the love that you've chosen? Why does it sound like a conspiracy drama? She smiled wryly in her heart, but no matter how many hidden dangers there were, the only thing she could feel was the warmth and love that the man had given her. How could she not love a man who kept all his dangers and fears behind him, and left her a peaceful haven, even though she knew that it might be dangerous to fall in love with him? She still wanted to turn into a moth flying into the fire and throw herself at his side, disregarding everything else. Was this a sign of lack of love? That must be it. She had a crush on that man who gave her so much love. There was no snow tonight, only the cold wind blowing. Dinner was still being served. Alvina Miller thanked the man for a long time, and even gifted him with a bag of fruits she had just bought from the supermarket. The man pushed so many times, Alvina Miller directly ran to her car to put it down and left. Then the man accepted it. Dinner was very sumptuous, and it was a perfect match for the sedan. With a single glance, she could tell that it was a nutritious meal. He was really thinking about it. Alvina Miller watched the news on her phone as she ate. As expected, a person's dinner followed by a phone was the best time for her. Joseph Grant, I want to fall in love with you in the phone. Actually, since she said that she was watching the news, it would be better to say that she only stared at the moving man without blinking her eyes. She did not listen to a single word of what the news said, and only stared at that man's exceptional appearance. Unknowingly, Alvina Miller was full. She reached out to rub her swollen stomach, and immediately became angry. It's all your fault. You caused me to eat so much. With the beautiful man's nourishing eyes, she was unable to stop eating. Alvina Miller decided to quickly digest the food she had eaten, so she rolled up her sleeves and decided to clean the whole living room. Alvina Miller wore earplugs, listened to the music, and took out a cloth to wipe herself clean as she walked up the stairs. Snow and wind swept through the city again. It was a vast expanse of white. One district suddenly had its electricity cut, and the entire road was pitch black. The sound of people swearing could be heard from time to time. Sir, where should we go? Coincidentally, Joseph Grant's convoy had also arrived at this section of the road where they were rushing to fix it. Lieutenant Hilton sat on the first passenger seat and asked him, "Do you lose your tail?" Joseph Grant raised his hand and twisted the center of his brows. His handsome face was hidden in the darkness. and a trace of light was shining in from outside the window. Occasionally, his distinct face would be imprinted. We lost them on 3rd Avenue. This area's electricity was affected. They couldn't follow us even if they wanted to. Lieutenant Hilton could not help but sneer. That group of people were becoming more and more deranged. I'll switch cars at the intersection up ahead. You accompany me over there. As for the rest of the carriages, return to the Grant residence. Joseph Grant suddenly made a request. Sir, are you going to see Miss Miller? There's a road up ahead, and we'll park there. When Lieutenant Hilton heard this, he couldn't help but want to laugh. The Mr. Vice President's spring really came. Without a sound, Joseph Grant got onto the last carriage and quickly drove away on the other road. The snow was getting heavier, and the fog on the road was getting thicker. Joseph Grant leaned on his seat. He was not looking tired anymore, his gaze looking past the snow and wind towards his home. As he got closer, he could vaguely see the lights on the watchtower. The man's thin lips slightly curled up. He had never been so crazy to return home before. Was it really because of that little girl that changed his state of mind? The charm of love, to be able to make a steel-like man become gentle, was truly a beautiful thing. The limousine passed through the Century Pavilion, and one could see the door of the ancient building from afar. Lights were burning in the living room.